Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It's really been a lot of pressure on our business.
The pump shock hitting far and wide, including local businesses absorbing the extra costs also.
Disheartened, and I couldn't believe such things will happen on the Canadian land.
A life taken too soon, remembering the UBC Okanagan security guard killed on the job. And
this is the beauty of human response to a horrific situation, heartbreaking situation.
Jumping into action, how British Columbians with ties to Ukraine are trying to help those on the ground.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Anita Bathe. Well, we've heard it was coming, and today it did. Gas officially topping $2 a litre in some parts. If all the social media posts tell us anything, there's been a bit of shock for sure. And tonight, our Joel Ballard is looking at how higher fuel prices are wreaking havoc on the bottom line for many businesses.
BC-born meal kit company Fresh Prep makes around 15,000 deliveries a week. With more than 100 drivers on the road, filling up at the pump is a pricey endeavor.
Obviously, it's a huge impact.
For weeks, gas prices have been on a steady rise, fueled by global politics and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Today, they reached new heights, more than $2 a litre, amongst the highest in Canada.
We don't charge our customers for delivery, so it's just increasing the costs to us, and we have to absorb all of that.
This comes after 2 years of obstacle after obstacle.
It's been really difficult, particularly with supply chain issues, food prices going up, produce is more expensive than it's ever been. So it's really been a lot of pressure on our business.
With gas prices on a seemingly never-ending climb, and sustainability at the forefront of the business, she says there's a big desire to electrify their fleet. And they aren't the only business looking for cheaper, more sustainable options. So too has the grocery delivery company Spud.
The impact on us is huge. It's something like 40% of an increase in fuel costs alone for last year.
But both companies have hit roadblocks when it comes to electric options.
For our industry, we need vans that can carry groceries far, so 200 kilometers. We need vans that can hold your groceries cold. And today, unfortunately, as an electric option, that just doesn't exist.
The demand is there, but the technology seems to be lagging. Experts say the impacts aren't limited to one industry.
We know when gas prices increase, the cost of goods, the cost of doing business severely escalates on all scales.
So companies are left with a tough choice: swallow the cost of high fuel prices or pass them on to consumers. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hundreds of people gathered today on Kelowna's UBC campus for a vigil for the 24-year-old security guard who died over the weekend. 24-year-old Harmandeep Kaur succumbed to her injuries after an attack inside a university building. Our Brady Strachan was there today speaking with those mourning her life.
Hundreds of people have gathered here outside University Centre on UBC's Okanagan campus. Many of them are placing flowers and candles at a memorial just in front of the building. They are remembering Harmandeep Kaur, a young woman who was similar in age to many students here on campus. Her death has shocked many people. Today, students say they're thankful to have an opportunity to reflect on the tragedy together and honor her life.
To me, I believe she was like my elder sister. She was my mentor. I've never met her, but she was from my community, my religion. And then I see these things happening here on the Canadian land. It disheartens me, and we wish to support everyone and come together so we can fight against such instances.
Many people stood silently in quiet contemplation during the vigil this afternoon. Some of them lit candles to be placed in front of the memorial. Members of Kaur's extended family say she immigrated from India several years ago and was working here at UBC Okanagan as a way to raise money to go back to school and further her education. Members of Kelowna's Sikh community also came out to the vigil. Mohini Singh is a city councillor.
We're devastated. Everyone is shocked. People want answers. People want to know what happened, particularly members of the Indo-Canadian community. Just want to know what happened. Sorry.
Meanwhile, the RCMP say they're still investigating the incident. Now, police say they took a man who was working at the university into custody and took him to the hospital to be held under the Mental Health Act. Now, police say he may face charges of murder, but so far, as of yet, no charges have been laid. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
A human rights complaint has been filed against the Cloverdale Rodeo and the city of Surrey, claiming hostile and demeaning working conditions. The complaint has been filed by Laura Balance on behalf of all contractors, employees, and volunteers who say they've experienced inappropriate conduct. Balance is a longtime contractor and volunteer for the rodeo. The complaint alleges the rodeo and the city condoned the behavior and refused to take meaningful action to address the harassment complaints. CBC has reached out to the rodeo and the city of Surrey, as well as Michael McSorley, who's the general manager of the rodeo until last year. None of them were willing to comment. Victoria police say they're investigating after a Russian church was vandalized. St. Sophia Orthodox Church contacted police after noticing the front doors were splattered with red paint Wednesday afternoon. Police say it's too soon to tell if the vandalism is considered a hate crime, but any incidents involving a place of worship are reviewed by their hate crimes unit. It's not clear if the church has security cameras. And as the situation between Russia and Ukraine escalates, people in BC are banding together to help out as quickly as possible. As Janella Hamilton reports, those with ties to Ukraine are jumping into action to ship essential goods to people back home.
In a matter of days, volunteers from the Holy Eucharist Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral have sprung into action, spending countless hours packaging boxes of donated tactical equipment, combat camouflage, and military medical first aid kits. Desperately needed supplies that will soon be shipped to regions near Ukraine and delivered by volunteers.
And in 3 suitcases, we were able to fit $17,000 worth of supplies.
Yesterday, Russian troops skirmished with the Ukrainian troops outside Europe's largest nuclear power plant, leaving the facility on fire. Fearing the worst, organizers are sending chemical protective clothing as well.
From my understanding, they have men and women out there wearing, civilian clothing, taking up arms to fight the Russians. So they're without very much equipment.
Hundreds are also in need of food.
But you can hear the sirens going on in towns.
It spurred Anastasia Avramenko to cook dozens of Ukrainian meals to help raise money.
I thought maybe I can make a homemade meals, Ukrainian meals, which is everybody loves, and I will be delivering them for a donation.
Funds raised will be sent directly to a bread factory in her hometown of Kherson.
He says no matter what, we're not stopping.
The city is currently occupied by Russian tanks and soldiers.
For 8 days, my family has been hiding in underground garages and hoping for the best. They don't have food. They have whatever, their preserved water. So it's very dangerous. It's very scary.
Father Ozorovich says the church is preparing to welcome refugees fleeing the war in Ukraine. Families like Anastasia's who fear for their life every day. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Port Coquitlam.
And we'll have much more on the invasion of Ukraine and the journalistic chill that has descended over Russia after harsh new rules for what they call disinformation. That's coming up. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe is here now, hanging out in that beautiful light once again, getting ready for that weekend forecast, Joe.
Yes, Anita, this is definitely a taste of the next couple of days. It was a gorgeous day across the South Coast today, really feeling that high pressure ridge, beautiful blue skies, temperatures into the double digits, and yeah, the light really noticeable. How early it was out this morning and how it lingers this evening, getting a couple extra minutes each day. Let me take you to the current temperatures. What we will notice as we head into tonight and the next couple of days, the dropping temperatures, because we're losing those clouds overnight. We'll see temperatures get close to the freezing mark tonight, Saturday night, and again for Sunday night, but afternoon highs still up to the double digits. And that high pressure really moving in as we speak, clearing the whole province out. Watch as it take you through the next 24 hours. What I am watching for anytime we get these sinking high pressure systems is locking in some low level marine air and fog. We may see some cloud to start our Saturday morning. You can see the model picking some up there across the valley around 9 a.m. I think that'll burn off quite quickly. And look at those winds, those yellow arrows coming from the northwest. That's a fresh flow for us. And that will continue for the most part through the weekend. So the next 24 hours looking something like this. Ending up around 1. That's your morning low temperature, back up to a 10 this afternoon. Anita, the hot spot across the country this afternoon was Squamish at a balmy 15. So lots of spring thoughts as we head into the weekend.
Wow, no kidding. 15. Okay. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Weather update brought to you by Alegria by Cirque du Soleil. Opens March 25th at Concord Pacific Place.
Hospitalizations in BC are still dropping today, going below 500. That's down 54% from when we hit a peak during the height of Omicron. At 484, hospitalizations dropped 27 since yesterday. Patients in critical care are also down by 10. 8 more people have died, and BC's death toll has now surpassed 2,900. I should also mention that we know those rapid antigen tests, before they were only available to those 70 plus in pharmacies. Today, now available to people 60 and over if you're looking for rapid antigen test. Okay, so with the numbers getting better in our province, many are convinced the government will pull back on some of the remaining pandemic restrictions next week. For a closer look, we bring over Justin McElroy. He's live tonight. Justin, we know things are changing, but can you tell us where transmission is still happening?
Yeah, and this has always been the question. We know that transmission has been steadily going down for several weeks. The question people want to know is how much compared to the peak. But we do have a couple ways that we can look at it. One is looking at hospitalizations, the daily number of new entries. And you can see there it's dropped by about 65%, 70% since the peak in the middle of January. It's now about 40 people today. That's about where we were during the Delta wave. And then you can also look at wastewater. That's always been an indication of what's going to be happening with transmission. And you can see it's down from anywhere from 75 to 80% to even like 95% in the 5 wastewater treatment plants in Metro Vancouver. But you can also see there in those lines, it started to plateau for a little bit. So there is still transmission out there. We don't know quite what that baseline is going to be, especially as we continue to see the effects of reopening up a little bit over the past few weeks. But this is why the government is both confident in its approach, but is also saying, look, this is a virus that is still going to be in the population for some time to come.
For sure. Okay, so what are some of the options that are on the table for the government to get rid of next week?
Well, the 3 questions that everyone is wondering and that other provinces have talked about already in terms of timelines are pretty straightforward. One is that masks in public places, that's something that is going away in most places by the end of March or middle of April in Quebec. One is vaccine cards. That is already away in most of the country at this point. And then the other is for employment mandates, whether people have to be vaccinated to do certain jobs. Some provinces have started to talk about discussing whether those could be removed. Nothing firm in any province yet, but those are the big questions that everyone's going to be watching for Health Minister Adrian Dix, Chief Health Officer Bonnie Henry, and Premier John Horgan. An announcement sometime next week. We don't know what day, but certainly a lot of eyes will be on what is chosen then.
All right, Justin, we know you'll keep us up to date. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita.
And with all of this, many parents seem to be opting to not get their kids the shot. Vaccination rates for those aged 5 to 11 in this province is just 57%. Our Brady Strachan is back tonight and tells us some say it doesn't have anything to do with vaccine hesitancy.
Do you want to push?
Yes, please.
All right.
For Allison Bentley, the decision to not vaccinate her son Quinn wasn't taken lightly. Everyone in her household is fully vaccinated, but Bentley says her teenage daughter experienced changes to her menstrual cycle after getting her shot last summer.
It's enough to give us a bit of pause when thinking of vaccinating our younger child.
A recent U.S. study found only small or temporary changes to menstruation in women following vaccination. However, concerns about the vaccine is one reason some younger children remain unvaccinated. Bentley's son is among a large percentage of children in the 5 to 11 age group in BC not vaccinated. BC is only second to Alberta in lowest rate of first dose uptake. Across Canada, Atlantic provinces have a much higher rate, with Newfoundland and Labrador leading the way at more than 85% of kids aged 5 to 11 who've had their first shot. There, health officials had in-school vaccination clinics and adopted a communication strategy emphasizing the benefits to older family members of immunizing children.
I think that whoever was in charge of that public relations campaign really had their finger on the pulse of what drives behavior in our province.
But why are parents in other provinces not getting their kids vaccinated? Health officials point to online misinformation as a major factor, but also logistical problems.
Dad, come out. This side.
Surrey, BC mother Stephanie Garber-Black wants her daughters fully vaccinated, but that hasn't happened yet.
It's not hesitation, it's availability of vaccine appointments. It's just staying home when illnesses are in our household and trying to find the right time to reschedule those appointments.
Researchers say that's a challenge faced by many parents, and it's even harder for those in low-income brackets.
You need to coordinate schedules for appointments between busy parents and children's schedules. The age 5 to 11 vaccine is actually a different dose than the age 12 and up vaccines, and not all clinics have that supply.
Health officials say reaching 90% vaccination in all age groups is ideal. But for most provinces right now in the 5 to 11 age group, that looks unlikely. Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna, British Columbia.
A journalistic chill has settled over Russia tonight as the war in Ukraine grows deadlier. Why the CBC, CNN, and the BBC are silencing their journalists in Moscow, and what that means in the war for reliable information. That's next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Well, many of us have tried on clothes that don't quite fit right, but this can be more of a problem for people with physical disabilities. That inspired one woman from Toronto to create a unique television show. The CBC's Talia Ricci spoke to the creator of Fashion Dis.
I'm Ardra Shepard. When multiple sclerosis stopped me from wearing heels, I was heartbroken. Fashion Dis is a makeover show that highlights the fashion and beauty and style potential of people with disabilities. What was it that inspired you to create a show like this? It was my own lived experience of becoming disabled and not seeing myself seen in the fashion and beauty industry and feeling like I was looking for those examples of people who were mobility aid users and who looked stylish and cool. And it was really frustrating to not see that out there. There was a long time when I never wanted my name and MS uttered in the same breath. But things have changed, and I feel extremely proud to be a part of this community and a voice for this community.
On this episode of Fashion Dis, Claire is tired of settling for clothes that don't fit.
Tell me a little bit about Claire's episode. Claire's episode was super fun. Claire is so sporty and confident and cool. It was really exciting to be able to introduce her to some style hacks that she wasn't aware of.
So I'm going to show you these black high tops that I just love. When you zip them open, they completely expose the inside of the shoe.
The footwear that I was given through the show has opened up kind of my world to a wide variety of shoes that I can wear now over my leg braces. If more brands picked up on this idea of clothes for everybody, then I think that it would just make the fashion industry that much more of a welcoming place for people with disabilities. It was one of the coolest things that I experienced. It felt like a part of our world is now going to get put out there.
You look like $1 million.
I feel it.
What do you hope people talk about after they watch an episode of Fashion Dis? It's really just about normalizing the experience and showing that, you know, people with disabilities, they care about style, they have full and joyful lives just like everyone else.
Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
As Russia's military continues its siege on Ukraine, NATO has rejected calls to help the Eastern European nation protect its skies from Russian missiles and warplanes. The military alliance, which includes Canada, is wary of being dragged into Moscow's war on its neighbor. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who appealed to NATO to set up a no-fly zone over his country, has strongly criticized the decision, saying the alliance has given Russia the green light to continue its bombing campaign. The shelling and missiles are pushing more and more people to flee from southwest Ukraine. Margaret Evans takes us into the smoldering streets.
With each passing day, 9 of them now, Ukraine slips ever deeper into the gaping maw of conflict. Villages, city streets, whole neighborhoods morphing into the unrecognizable. This video released on social media shows the city of Chernihiv after a missile strike yesterday. The faceless scream that followed, echoing that of a country still in shock over what's happened and what more may be to come. The world held its breath overnight when news broke of a Russian assault near Europe's biggest nuclear power plant, shelling hitting a nearby building and setting it on fire. Russia, now in control of the plant, accused Ukraine of provoking the incident by firing on Russian troops to encourage return fire on the building. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's response was to renew pleas to Western nations to introduce a no-fly zone. Only this measure, he said, can guarantee Russia will not hit nuclear infrastructure with rockets and bombs. In the capital, Kyiv, residents are still bracing themselves for an all-out assault. Here, the remains of a cruise missile reportedly shot down by air defenses. I'm terrified, says this man, calling the incident at the nuclear plant horrifying. If they do anything like that again, there will be consequences for the whole of Europe. There are already consequences. More than 1.2 million people have fled Ukraine, exchanging bombed-out buildings and underground shelters for crowded railway platforms, carrying with them the weight of broken hearts and painful partings, the men often staying behind to fight.
Anxious because of everything in this world doing right now.
For those trapped and left behind, there is no sign as yet of the humanitarian corridors people are calling for. Even Ukraine's young seem to realize that for many, there will be no escape. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Chernivtsi.
As the fighting rages, the unfolding humanitarian crisis grows worse by the day. As we just heard, 1.2 million people have now fled Ukraine. Nearly half are children. Sarah Levitt now on the race to escape and the uncertain road that lies ahead.
For some, there are tearful reunions. For others, relief mixed with fear of the unknown ahead. As the attacks in Ukraine continue, so too does the exodus out, about half to Poland. We don't know where we're going, she says, first into Poland and then to anywhere that'll take refugees. Among those who continue to flee, children.
500,000 children have been forced to flee their homes in just 7 days. This is unprecedented in scale and speed.
It's not just people leaving, but animals too. Family pets make the journey. Lions and tigers were taken out of a sanctuary in Kyiv to a zoo in Poland.
I woke up from two loud explosions.
Sofia Shton was at home with her parents in Kyiv when Russia began the assault. In a stroke of luck, just 2 days before, she received a Canadian visa to visit her sister who lives in Montreal. But she had to get out first. She managed to hitch a ride from Kyiv to Lviv with a stranger before crossing into Poland and flying to Montreal. Her parents decided to stay in Ukraine. She'll stay in Canada for now.
I just reassure myself that everything is going to be okay with my parents. that we are gonna win this war.
Until then, mobilization of aid, food, and shelter has been key, both for those streaming out of Ukraine and for those who remain. For many, securing humanitarian corridors is key, particularly for those who need help immediately.
Safe access will be very critical, both in terms of asset as well as teams that they are very willing to provide the needed support, medical support for the medical care.
At this Polish border town, a piano player welcomes those who arrive, an attempt to ease their worries, if only for a moment. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
Starting today, it is illegal for anyone in Russia to report that Ukraine is being invaded. That includes foreign journalists. As Aaron Collins tells us, any deviation from the government's version of events could land them in prison for 15 years.
The fog of war doing what it does. Even basic facts about Ukraine now disputed in Russia. Take the location of Ukraine's president. He says he's hunkered down in Kyiv. Most of the world believes him. But in Russia, a different story. People there told he's fled to neighboring Poland. For Vladimir Putin, controlling the narrative inside Russia, key to justifying his war.
Я за Путина. Я поняла. Даже не буду смотреть фотографии. Ну вот это вот ничего этому не. Я за Путина.
But not all Russians are buying the Kremlin's story.
Мне тоже как бы не нравится вся эта ситуация. Не думайте, что как бы нам это все нравится.
Russia has now made it illegal to disagree with its version of this story. A journalist can be jailed for 15 years just for straying from the Kremlin's narrative. They can't even call it a war. That after the country had cracked down on independent journalism.
Media do not exist anymore in Russia. There's no such thing as media in Russia anymore. There's only propaganda.
Access to Western media already banned in Russia. Now Facebook has been shut down too. Just like during the Cold War, the BBC is turning to shortwave radio to reach the Russian people directly.
Ordinary people in Russia turning to these trusted voices from their own past to try and work out what is going on today, realizing that their government is not telling them the truth.
Now, major Western news organizations are going silent in Russia, a void for Russians searching for the truth about the war in Ukraine, one Russia's government is all too happy to fill. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
And our journalists here at the CBC have been temporarily suspended from reporting on the ground in Russia out of concern for the risk to both them and other staff. In a statement, the CBC says it is very concerned about new legislation passed in Russia, which appears to criminalize independent reporting on the current situation in Ukraine and Russia. CBC says it will seek to clarify the effect of the law, adding, "We join other media in standing up for a free press and unimpeded access to accurate, independent journalism." We want to take a closer look at the impacts of blocking independent news and social media sites in Russia. We're joined by UBC journalism professor Alfred Hermida. Alfred, first off, what's your reaction to Russia's move today, effectively choking out the flow of legitimate information?
Well, it's clear what Russia is trying to do here is control the narrative. And the way you do that is you prevent any independent media, either in Russia or from outside Russia, to be able to report on the invasion. And instead, you'll get the official Putin-authorized version. We've seen something like 140 news and information sites already banned, as well as Facebook. So that's preventing the flow of information on social media. And it's really trying to create a narrative that this is a Russian success story rather than a Russian invasion that's not going nearly as well as Putin had hoped for.
And do you think we're going to start seeing all foreign journalists get pulled completely out of Russia? And should that be happening now because of the potential dangers?
Well, what's really difficult for foreign journalists in Russia, and domestic journalists for that matter, is the new laws that have been brought in, ostensibly to challenge so-called fake news, but effectively what they are is saying if you broadcast something that isn't the official state line, like calling the Ukrainian military operation an invasion, you could be jailed for up to 15 years. And under those conditions, it's going to become very hard, not just for local journalists, but for any foreign journalists to operate that, because as soon as they try to do any independent reporting, they're opening themselves up to be imprisoned for basically telling the truth.
I want to get back to that flow of information. What will it mean for millions of Russians who now find themselves cut off from reliable information and from social media, like you mentioned, which is essentially a lifeline to connecting with family and friends?
Yeah, so not only is Facebook banned, but Twitter is still accessible, but it's being controlled to such an extent that it's almost unusable. And what we've seen instead is that tech-savvy Russians are turning to technological tools like VPN, virtual private networks, to try to circumvent the internet censorship. And the use of these tools, these VPN tools, has risen by something like 700% in the last week. So there's clearly Russians who want to know what's going on, want to know the truth, and are trying to find the technological means to bypass state censorship.
Okay, so that's Russians that are doing that, trying to get their information. But what's been the reaction from Facebook and Twitter? Can those companies reasonably expect that they can fight Russia on this now?
Well, Facebook has obviously expressed its concern that it's been banned and that millions of Russians can no longer access Facebook, not just for news, but for communities, their friends, their families. It's hard to see what these tech giants can do, given that the internet is controlled by the state regulator. But there are organizations providing advice on how to circumvent some of these means. And if you can find a way of bypassing the controls, then perhaps you can get then onto Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms.
UBC journalism professor Alfred Hermida, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
To the casual observer, they may seem like an ordinary shoe, but for one 21-year-old Port Moody man, that passion for sneakers has turned into a living.
Check out the arms on Alexei Salamoni. He can bench press twice his weight and fly across the ice, making him a top scorer on the U.S. sledge hockey team.
I'm often called the Russian Rocket. Despite the American flag, it's because of my national heritage.
But it's Salamoni's legs that actually brought him to the Paralympics. He was born in Ukraine, not far from Chernobyl, 14 months after the worst nuclear accident in history. Radiation released by the explosions caused the incidence of birth defects to triple in Ukraine. Salamoni was born with malformed, twisted legs. His parents sent him to an orphanage. He was a toddler when his legs were amputated.
I remember that I was alone, and when I was adopted, that it was one of the happiest moments of my life as a kid.
He's more interested in talking hockey than nuclear disasters. He's never learned what happened to his birth parents, and he's never been back to Ukraine. There's no question which country is home now.
Because it means a lot to me, not only playing for Team USA, but just coming to USA when I was 6 years old from Russia, and because I didn't have a life back there. You know, I was disabled.
Now his abilities have won him a place on the U.S. Paralympic team and sponsorship by Team Visa. In this promotional video, you can see Salamoni sometimes wears prosthetic legs. He played sledge hockey like that too, until a mentor gave him this advice.
So he says, listen, take your legs off. You'll be a lot shorter, lighter, because that's the same thing he went through in Nagano.
That was 8 years ago, when he switched to this small sledge covered in stars and stripes. That's when Salamoni and others realized he might be great at this.
It was almost like I was born again. You know, it was really cool. It really was, because a lot of people started gaining respect for myself as a good player.
A player who helped his team win bronze in Turin and who's leading their race for gold at these games. Lisa Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
This was more than just Canada's first golden moment at a Paralympics on home soil. It was also a bit of redemption.
You know, it's a chance of a lifetime to do a home games.
McKeever and his brother raced into the stadium in front of the screaming hometown crowd, 40 seconds ahead of their nearest competitors. Happiness today helps replace some of the disappointment he felt late last month.
It hurts as much as the day that I was told I was going to lose my eyesight.
McKeever is arguably the most accomplished blind skier ever. When competing in Paralympic events, his brother acts as a guide, but McKeever has also held his own in able-bodied competitions so that he qualified for the Olympic cross-country team. But just before the race, the team said McKeever wouldn't be one of the 4 skiers taking part.
The Olympics.
But one of his Paralympic coaches says today all that extra training paid off.
The strategy was to stay loose at the start, stay with the pack, don't let them go too far ahead, and then pick up the pace as they went through and ski solid and be confident.
They had never won the 20K, taking silver in Salt Lake City and Turin. But with today's victory, McKeever has 5 golds and 8 Paralympic medals overall. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Whistler.
After a 2-year absence because of COVID, SneakerCon will be back in Vancouver tomorrow. It's an annual event where buyers, sellers, and collectors of vintage sneakers get together and celebrate all things retro and lace-up. But for some people, the resale market for 80s basketball shoes is more than a hobby. It's a career. Port Moody's Ty Engman, he's a vintage sneaker collector, and he's also a seller with Curated Van. His passion for high-top fashion has led him to become a sought-after agent, connecting people, including celebrities like Kevin Hart and Devin Booker, with old-school kicks of their dreams. So for someone who knows nothing about sneakers, knows nothing about how crazy this whole market has gone, tell us what you do and how exactly it works.
Yeah, so pretty much I've kind of built up a brand now where I just go out, source shoes for people who are looking for specific shoes. So for me, my main focus is on 1985 Jordans, which is the first Jordan that Michael Jordan released after he got signed to the Bulls, as well as some older Nikes. And then I find the shoe and find the buyer, and that's pretty much how it works.
But you've gained a lot of popularity with celebrities. So what is it that sets you apart from other people who are selling these shoes? Like you're a guy from Port Moody, and these celebrities are coming here to you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like when I first started, I didn't think that it would get to this level. I was kind of just doing it because I enjoyed it, and I collect them myself. So it was kind of a hobby as well as something that I enjoyed, and then it ended up taking off. And I guess that's just kind of because I put more focus on curating the shoes and kind of hand-picking and which ones have historic value behind them and which kind of help create the sneaker culture that we have today.
What's the coolest pair of shoes that you found and sold or maybe kept for yourself?
Still have them. They're a signed pair by Michael Jordan. So that pair I'm not looking to get rid of because that's history, and I look up to Michael Jordan. He's arguably the best basketball player of all time.
And how do you actually find these shoes? And are you looking all over the world? Are you looking locally? Tell us how that works.
Yeah, so definitely all over the world. Kind of when I first started, I was doing a lot of outsourcing from Japan, but as there's gotten a lot more interest in this specific shoe, it's drying up. But now a majority of it is from North America, the States, some that come from like France, London, kind of all over. There really isn't just one place.
So these are just people who bought these shoes back in 1985 and kept them all this time, and now they know that they can make a buck off them?
Some cases where someone just bought the shoe in 1985 or they bought them for someone else, ended up throwing them away in a bin, and they just ended up sitting there for that long. Those are honestly the coolest stories because then you kind of hear about why that shoe was never worn and whatnot. But a lot of the time it's just through word of mouth, through other people I've met and connected with, that if their friend's selling a shoe and they know I'd be interested in it, then they're connecting them to me.
How has this market grown over the last couple of years or since you got into it?
When I first started, like, there was not near as many people selling shoes as there is now. It's doubling like mad. So many people are getting into it, and I think that that's kind of just because everything's kind of moving online and whatnot, and a lot more people are into sneakers than, I guess, the past times. So right now the market just continues to grow.
Yeah, my husband and all my friends around me are super into it, so I think it's probably time that I probably take a look and get into it too. Thank you very much for your time.
No problem.
cost of moving isn't always as advertised, why the final bill can be so much higher than the estimate. At 6:39, a live look tonight. A lot of snow on the ground, and we are looking at a sunny stretch down here, though, for the lower mainland. Warm as well. Is it time to break out the sunscreen? Johanna will tell us why you might want to have it handy next.
Okay, someone discovers how to reverse the magnetic poles of the whole world, and they hold everyone hostage. Or else everybody will be upside down.
This is a TV writer's room. 3 comedy writers are pitching ideas.
A world wherein corporations were trying to genetically engineer giant food sources, or an experiment gone wrong, and we get giant crabs, and they're everywhere. What a nuisance that would be.
But our goal isn't to make each other laugh. Our goal is to come up with a serious science fiction pilot.
A group of mercenaries are flying through the universe hunting and killing black holes.
Can we do it?
What do you call it?
Yeah, hole hunters.
We'll see. My name is Ryan Beal. I'm an actor, comedian, but I'm also a huge science fiction nerd. And it's been my lifelong dream to write a TV show as good as Star Trek. And to do this, I've enlisted my 2 comedy writing partners, Mark Chavez and Maddie Kelly. Over the course of 8 episodes, you'll hear us try to crack the code on our science fiction pilot.
What if the telemarketer, robot caller, ends up calling another planet by mistake, Mark? I don't know.
And when we run into trouble, we'll get help from serious experts. People who've worked on things like Star Trek and Star Wars.
Anything the world should know about George Lucas?
I'm under a lifetime NDA, I think.
Firefly, District 9, and Sharknado?
I was dealing with the tornado bit. They kept the sharks from me.
We get science lessons from Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Why are you doing this? Have you already identified another Earth?
And Rainn Wilson from The Office will critique our dialogue.
Is it supposed to be funny that he keeps calling her number 2?
Yeah, so that stood out a lot to me, hearing it out loud.
And in the final episode, you'll get to hear what we've come up with. Our pilot will be read by real actors, for better or worse.
Is it too late to change the idea entirely?
What a bombshell.
It's Let's Make a Sci-Fi, launching March 1st.
My mind can have the ability to make me do incredible things, and it can totally crush me.
It has its moments when it creeps in. The way that I felt when I was a kid, when I was bullied.
I put my foot down wrong, and it snapped. I remember so many screams coming out of me, noises that I never thought were ever possible.
You have 24 hours to feel sorry for yourself, and you got to get back to work.
To think about getting on skates again was terrifying.
We're all going to the Super Bowl, except it's 30 teams going to the Super Bowl. It only happens once every 4 years, so you better have your shit together and get ready to go.
The mind is the most powerful thing in the world.
CBC Marketplace is looking into rip-off allegations about movers who quote low but bill much higher only after they've got all your stuff. It's what some industry watchers view as a hostage-taking style practice. To see it firsthand, David Common and the Marketplace team hired a moving company at the center of several complaints.
Hi there.
Hi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
We're testing moving companies after hearing customer complaints that low quotes lead to high prices once your stuff is in their truck. So they plan to charge us $1,500 to move it. But they also say that we will pay based on how much it weighs. In emails, the movers estimated our weight at 3,000 pounds. But once everything is loaded...
Can you write here 4,000 and your signature?
They're telling us to sign a contract for £4,000. Other customers have had similar experiences. But what's different this time? We weighed our move ourselves. We have 1,280 pounds, way less than they're now claiming. And the surprises don't stop. With our belongings gone, their office now calls with a new price.
It would be $32, $34, and 65 cents.
That's nearly double their most recent estimate.
We're just like right behind it.
A week later, we're following the truck, waiting for our stuff to be dropped off when they deliver to this house. Later, we catch up with the woman being moved. And guess what? She got a call to pay more than double what she was expecting, only once the moving truck had left with all her stuff.
Do you think you've been taken advantage of? Can you afford to be?
No. They shouldn't be doing this to older people or even young people.
It underscores the importance of having reputable movers who visit your home first, says this industry rep.
We were doing it virtually, and if they refuse to do it, dollars to donuts are scams.
The movers did eventually deliver our belongings, most of them anyway, and we were at least the third customer that day who ended up paying more than they expected. David Common, CBC News, Sudbury, Ontario.
Tune in tonight as CBC Marketplace takes you through the full story and names the companies involved. That's at 8 p.m. and anytime on CBC Gem. Well, as gas prices soar across BC, RCMP on Vancouver Island are going green with electric vehicles. West Shore RCMP announced today that electric cruisers, Teslas, will be used. This will be the first ever frontline electric vehicle in Canada, and it's currently being retrofitted in Ottawa. The Tesla Y model was trialed by police in Washington state. It's all part of the RCMP's goal to be net zero by 2050.
To your day-to-day calls, you'll start seeing them in electric vehicles soon.
Both Victoria Police and Saanich Police also hope to eventually go green, but rigorous testing needs to be done before any orders are placed. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. I'm sure something that maybe is I was going to assume and say you're thinking it's a good thing, but maybe it's not. I don't know what's been tested and what's not.
Yeah, well, to be fair, you know what? It's funny, Anita. I was actually the first thing this morning, opened Twitter up, and the Victoria Police were tweeting about their new ride. So yeah, it's an interesting conversation that everyone's having right now. As we head into the weekend, though, might want to think about trading the vehicle for, I don't know, a bike ride. Because it's going to be a gorgeous weekend. Yeah, anything you can do to get outside. And this goes for the whole province. But let me start you off with the whole country. Just a quick check-in on where winter is lingering. Still in through northeastern parts of the country. We're still seeing minus temperatures tonight as we head into the late evening hours on the East Coast, -4 for Toronto. Still dealing with snow in Saskatchewan as we speak. That'll track eastward over the weekend. And then you head over to the warmest spot in the country, and that would be southern British Columbia. So high pressure moving in for all of the province. We're seeing some lingering showers up towards northern coastal sections. And with that sinking air mass, you can see that cloud. Here's a snapshot Saturday afternoon. Cloud lingering in through the valleys. We're getting a bit of an inversion building in. But I think we can enjoy this weekend almost guilt-free. It's a tough one to do with weather. There's always two sides to the weather coin. But we've just had some good replenishing mountain snow. So enjoy that sunshine over the next couple of days. And as you can see, showing up everywhere. Prince George, Williams Lake, a little cooler and a little cloudier up towards the east. Prince Rupert looking at a 7. Chance of the fog for everyone in the morning hours. Kelowna, you'll see that in through the Okanagan as well, but clearing skies in the afternoon. And Cranbrook, look for some flurries both tonight and tomorrow night. But watch these temperatures. They're pretty much bang on seasonal for this time of the year. Then they start to rise as we head into early next week. That's as another pressure system approaches for Monday. But a couple of gorgeous days. Low UV index, but this time of the year, the sun angle is a lot higher, and wouldn't be the worst idea to get the sunscreen out and watch for those green buds coming out, Anita.
I just happened to order some new sunscreen, Joe, so I'm all ready.
Well done. It's like you knew spring was around the corner.
Well, I had a good friend tell me.
No problem.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
North Vancouver resident has accomplished a feat last achieved by a Canadian 8 years ago. Skier Cameron Alexander has won a World Cup downhill race. Alexander was a late starter in today's downhill competition in Norway, but he finished with the fastest time of the day, 44.42 seconds. He actually tied a Swiss skier, so they did share the podium.
I know all I had to do was just let go and try and give it my best, and that's what I did today, and what do you know? I'm on the top of the podium.
Alexander missed all but one race last season due to a knee injury after a crash. His best finish in a World Cup before this was 10th place 2 years ago. And the 2022 Winter Paralympics officially started today, but these games are taking place in a world dramatically changed after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And as Devin Heroux reports, one delegation was met with loud cheers during the Parade of Nations at the opening ceremony.
Ukraine.
It was billed to be an emotional evening inside the Bird's Nest, and it certainly was. Consider the journey the Ukrainian athletes have taken to arrive at these games, and when they triumphantly entered the stadium, upwards of 30,000 fans cheered them on. But also consider the journey of all these Paralympians, resilient, no doubt, in the face of a pandemic. 564 athletes will compete at these games. An historic amount of women will compete at these Paralympics. For the Canadian delegation, 49 athletes competing here. They were led into the Bird's Nest tonight by wheelchair curler Ina Forrest and para-ice hockey player Greg Westlake. It is historic because it marks the first time there are two flag bearers for Canada at the Paralympics. So now the spotlight shines on sport and on the athletes. It is also important to point out the speech given by International Paralympic Committee President Andrew Parsons tonight, who at the end of it gave out a scream across the stadium yelling, "Peace." It is a message that resonated across this stadium and no doubt resonating around the world. For CBC Sports in Beijing, I'm Devin Heroux.
Well, he's one of Vancouver's biggest exports to Hollywood, and Ryan Reynolds got a brand new film that's hitting your screens next week. We talk about the Adam Project, filmed here in British Columbia, next.
Hi, my name is Eldred Allen, and I'm from Riglet in northern Labrador. I started a photo project in 2019 where I wanted to photograph as many elders in my community as possible. The reason I call it Resemblance is because when I was standing behind the camera looking through my viewfinder and taking pictures of the elders, oftentimes because I live and I'm from the community, I would see in their faces someone that they're related to. So when I looked at one elder, I saw his grandson. There was such a huge resemblance between the two. And I took a photograph of another lady, and when I showed her the picture on the back of the camera, she said, "I look just like my mother." So, you know, in each of the photographs, I was seeing how they resembled somebody else, or they were seeing it themselves. So it seemed like a really fitting title to call it Resemblance. I only started photography in the fall of 2018, and I was trying to learn and teach myself different techniques and different types of photography. So I was talking with my wife, and we were thinking of what would be an interesting photo project. Well, elders, of course, within any family, but especially, you know, in Inuit culture and Inuit families, they're traditional knowledge holders. You know, if people want to learn about the past and learn about the way things were done in the past, or, you know, they have questions about how things are changing. You know, they have so much built up knowledge and experience. They're so valuable and so important, and people see them as the real staples within the foundations of their family. So it's it seemed like a really important thing to go out and capture them. And the response I was getting, it really solidified the fact that, you know, people really see them as valuable and important, and they wanted to see them, so that spurred me on to want to continue and capture and show these elders in a really, you know, kind of an artistic and beautiful way that people may not have seen an image captured of them in that way before. To have a solo exhibition of 30 of my images, you know, shown in this space in the rooms, I'd say I feel extremely humbled and very appreciative that they would see my photographs as important enough and captured in a way that is, you know, the technicality of the images themselves are good enough that they would be able to be displayed. I'm very appreciative and looking forward to getting down to see it for myself.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On March 10th, join CBC British Columbia's Michelle Elliott and inspirational female entrepreneurs at the Surrey Board of Trade's Entrepreneur Showcase. Register for the discussion today at businessinsurrey.com and never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
2 Vancouver Island men are recovering in hospital after an amazing act of generosity. One donated his kidney to the other. Qualicum First Nation Chief Michael Recalma had been looking for a new kidney for 4 years. Then Qualicum Beach councillor Scott Harrison heard about his situation and stepped up. The operations took place and went perfectly.
Definitely changes somebody's life. It changes the person you're giving that organ to. It just gives them that, I keep saying, another lease on life. And it does. It changes them forever.
After agreeing to donate the kidney, Harrison says he himself learned he was a descendant of a Hudson's Bay employee who advocated for the colonization of Vancouver Island. Harrison calls it a full circle moment. And Canadian-born film star Ryan Reynolds has seen many fantasy adventures on screen, but in his latest role as a time traveler, the actor is offering his fans a glimpse into something deeply personal. And as Eli Glasner finds out, Reynolds also has more real-life ventures that go on even after the spotlights go off.
Take it easy. Or, you know, fall down and scream.
In The Adam Project, Ryan Reynolds plays a time traveler who meets his younger self. The Canadian actor says he wanted to revisit the kind of films he was raised on.
We watched over and over again E.T. and Goonies and Back to the Future and Stand By Me. Nope!
The movie is a reunion for Reynolds, who filmed the summer smash Free Guy with Montreal director Sean Levy. In a world of sequels and spin-offs, Free Guy was the only original film in 2021's top 10.
The thing that's remarkable is this is an original story. This is something fresh. Yeah. You did that with Free Guy. You did that with Red Notice. Like, you could have done Goonies, the sequel. Like, Hollywood is littered with IP and franchises. Were you worried about the risk?
Netflix is probably the foremost player in the game of making big tentpole originals right now, and I'm super grateful that they let us do this, and I think that it's kind of an amazing thing. I would be crucified and killed if I did Goonies 2 just out of the blue.
Reynolds likes to joke, but under the time-traveling shenanigans is a story about a son missing his father. Reynolds lost his own father to Parkinson's disease a few years ago.
He is playing scenes that are extremely relatable to him when he finally makes peace with his old man at the end of the Adam Project. That's the moment that Ryan never got to have with James Reynolds.
Besides getting real, Reynolds is giving back with his organization Group Effort Initiative, which brings marginalized voices into the industry. Voices like trans theater student AJ.
He was like, oh yeah, like you use they, them pronouns, right? I was like, yeah.
And AJ had their own message for Reynolds.
He is so worried about like taking care of everyone else sometimes that I think that he doesn't realize just how much good he has put into the world.
They're making me cry.
That was awesome.
While Reynolds won't slow down, he says the idea behind the program and everything he does is telling better stories. Eli Glassner, CBC News, Toronto.
And the National will have the first part of a two-part interview with Ryan Reynolds on their broadcast tonight. The second part airs on Sunday, where Reynolds talks all things growing up in Vancouver. That's going to be with Ian Hennemansing. Thanks so much for watching CBC Vancouver News tonight. Have a great weekend.